Hello and welcome to the V2V podcast. My name is Marcus Parrish and this is a new series. It's associated with kind of what we were doing with the Survivor Series episodes. But in this case, Liz Ianelli and I are going to be discussing relationships and how those manifest after survivorship and what to look out for, what works. And I think today we're going to start this off with kind of a broad discussion about trauma's impact on intimate relationships. And intimate relationships meaning like love interests, partners, and we can expand that out to, friends and associates, but primarily on interpersonal relationships between people who are couples or intend to be couples or want to be couples. So I think that's what we're going to talk about, trust, and we're going to talk about us. Welcome, Liz.
Thanks. Good to be here.
All right. So we don't really have a strict format. So as we're starting off, because I kind of wanted to keep it more loose in the sense that so we can examine and of what we're talking about along with the people who are listening. And we're always open for topic ideas that people are concerned about. This trust thing was something that was presented to me as an idea when we kind of first came up with this series. So if you have anything in particular to share to start us off, that would be cool. Otherwise, we can just kind of keep the discussion more general. So what have you got?
What have I got? A lot.
Yeah. Okay.
So, I think, in terms of survivors and having worked with a lot of survivors therapeutically, and just, and being a survivor myself, I've kind of seen a very recurring theme, I guess, in relationships, after someone has survived, the industry or trauma in general. And it's a really wide range. So this is kind of like a very large net that we cast. It's not a one.
And to those who don't know, and to those who aren't aware, sorry, the industry being the troubled teen industry specifically. Now, because I know that's where you come from.
Right.
Other traumatic systems can certainly apply, but you're coming from specifically from that background, whereas my experience has been more in a cult environment as a teen with Scientology, but similar results. But I'll let you go on. I just wanted to clarify that so people understand what you meant.
Absolutely, and I think that in terms of kind of where we come from, even though we're kind of in two different, I guess, sectors of trauma by an institution or a cult or a program, these were typically experiences that were a prolonged time frame of exposure to trauma or the inability to think freely. Our ideas about sex, about masturbation, about self-love, self-worth were kind of all rewired poorly, kind of like rigged together and not really in a good, I guess, not very good architecture going forward.
Right.
And so
This reminds me of kind of the overarching thing that kind of defines all of this stuff in some ways as the attempt to behavior modify.
Right. And in the behavioral modification. Right. And what happened was that the programs or cults or anything where there's groupthink or you lose your inability, they took away our individuality and they took away our ability for self-autonomy and like self-determination. So our emotions were really driven towards survival, not towards a nurturing, loving, healthy, healing environment with the goal of being well. We were instead kind of injected with this, what I call a virus, that it was a lot of aggression and self-hate and perpetuating violence, being a victim of violence. So essentially, if you think about it, as young adults from 12 on, we were already survivors of a form of domestic violence. If you look at the definition, in its own, even witnessing incidents of violence. So our threshold for chaos is extremely high for many survivors. So what may seem, or what would normally seem out of order, or whoa, this is dangerous, to a person without this kind of trauma, or at least for myself, and I've heard this from other survivors, we have a high threshold for chaotic relationships, and because we have been through trauma, we do have a greater sense of empathy for our partners who may be suffering, whether it's from addiction or even violence or anxiety or whatever. We don't want to become a monster to them or punish them. And I think a lot of us lose our way because whether or not someone loves us, we don't really understand early on what love really even means. So in entering into a relationship, even for me, like fresh out of a program, I was looking for someone immediately that, for a variety of reasons, but one, I wanted someone that could keep me safe. I wanted someone that wasn't going to ask me a lot of questions about where I had been. I wanted someone who could, it was more valuable to me at that time, will I have food, shelter, clothing? Will my basic needs be met? If they like me, that'd be great, but they don't have to. If they love me, bonus, but I wasn't very concerned with that early on. And I didn't think I was worth much at all. So self-worth also contributes to, we kind of attract what we think we deserve, which in many cases is far below what we actually do.
So in turning this topic over to a more concrete idea of trust, because clearly when you're put into a situation that is violent or traumatic or anxiety provoking, you lose that foundation to foster healthy relationships. Like the idea of, I'll say it like this. We often look at trust like it's a kind of a mystical, undefined concept, but what it really is trust is a choice to be available and vulnerable and transparent in any relationship.
Right.
Because the person you're trusting has proven worthy of your partnership with them through consistency in their honesty, integrity, and dependability. So that gets shattered pretty early because you find out that you're being lied to and continue to be lied to about your world and what's permissible and what's appropriate, and you have people who are trying to change your views regarding these things say for instance, like a teen survivor leaves that environment where they're being coerced into behaving a certain way. When they get back out into the quote unquote real world where people aren't behaving that way, and they assume that you're as familiar with the world that they live in as they are, you automatically are deficient in this idea of trusting anybody, because of the experience that you've been through, but don't necessarily want to share with that other person because they either wouldn't understand you, or it's embarrassing, or you feel ashamed, or you feel guilty or weird. So, so that's an incredibly high barrier to overcome. This idea that a survivor of prolonged trauma, and we're not talking about trauma in the sense of the death of a child, which is a different kind of trauma, or the normal breakup of relationships, or traumatic experiences like loss of a job or becoming homeless. We're talking about prolonged, coercive,
mental manipulation,
institutionalization by a particular group of people that want to turn you into something that you're not. Like, for instance, the most obvious version of this that people understand or can kind of relate to is like gay conversion therapy, or where it's clearly understood by most people that that's a ludicrous thing. Like, it's just ridiculous. And yet, it's still practiced, and people still send their kids, their little lesbian daughter, who they send her off to this camp, and where they're going to pray the gay away, and then this poor girl gets out and is clearly going to be confused about not only her own beliefs at this point, but how can she trust that what other people are telling her is true when she's been lied to so many times before. So,
right. And I think the challenge too is, and I could speak from my own experience, my very first, major relationship after the program, I didn't realize that, I was angry that I had gone through something crazy, and I couldn't really speak that language yet. I didn't have enough words to describe to my partner at that time. And I thought, that I was supposed to get married, that I was supposed to have children, that these were like life goals. If you wanted to be normal and you're accepted by your family, then you find a nice guy who's going to marry you. And literally what happened was, the first guy that smiled at me, I ended up marrying. Like,
wow.
Hey, you want to get married? Like, sure. Like, it was like, okay, I checked the box. Like, I'm going to get married. And I had no idea what that meant. And, in my program, it was very, very, very frowned upon. Boys and girls were separated. And any even eye contact could have been construed as you having even sexual thoughts, okay? So even after I left the program, I thought they could still read my mind. That's how much I thought they were in our heads. And connecting with a partner, let's talk about I'll lay it out there right now. A lot of survivors don't want to talk about sex, and which is a very major part of intimate relationships. And sex involves trust, and sex involves safety and vulnerability. And I think for me, in my experience, it was terrifying. Even though I was married, I thought I was doing something wrong. I was unsure how to interact. I had not had a normal high school experience of having a boyfriend or breaking up with a boyfriend, or what's acceptable or what's not, or what am I willing to accept or not accept. And really, what I was willing, whatever, his behaviors were, it didn't matter, because I felt that I had no place to ask for anything different, or to say, hey, I don't really like being yelled at. I didn't feel I had any power to even verbalize that, or, hey, I'm a little nervous about sex, and I kind of feel like I'm not involved, and I was like, is it me? Is it him? Am I not, enough of something? And everything boiled down to I wasn't enough. So it was a very chaotic relationship, and I had a very difficult time understanding his response to my responses. You know, like it was kind of like we had two different, not love languages. I'm not into that. It's just, I had certain needs where I needed to feel safe and secure, and I needed at that time, you know, at 20, 21, I needed someone to reassure me verbally that I was safe, that I was okay, or I was enough. And without that present, how do I even ask for someone to tell me that I'm enough? And
sure,
I was
sure.
very accepting of bad behaviors, and I was very critical. And my fault in that first relationship was that I, like in the program, you know, it's called the table topic, or like a rap session for straight kids, or, you know, like different names, different programs where it was a group confrontation. I felt I had this compulsion to literally, we were taught to interrogate other students, so it was very natural for me to interrogate my husband at that time about anything and everything that I thought was potentially unsafe. And so
Sure.
it was compulsive. I couldn't help it, and I was very quick to point out faults, and I was very critical, and I was very difficult, and I felt unlovable, and I felt that I guess I resigned to the fact, like, well, I guess this is as good as it's going to get, but I'm still going to buck, you know, and kind of fight it, but we'll see what happens.
Well,
and
right, there's a few things going on here. You're right.
Yeah.
Understood. There's a few things going on here. So when people are traumatized, especially long-term, there becomes this, like, driving force that's amplified to feel safe and cared for, especially by your partner, you know, whether you realize it or not. And it can kind of become, which it sounds like it did in your case, that central focus is you're trying to heal. Like, you want this other person to heal you.
Right,
so if you,
right.
So you get into these situations like a smile is a marriage proposal. It's an effort to soothe yourself and look for a way out of that uncomfortable place that you're in, because you find yourself so lost in the world looking for someone to care for you.
Right, and it almost felt primal, like it wasn't a choice. It wasn't like, wow, I think I should get married. It was like, whoa, I need to get, like, almost like, you know, I need to get milk, or I'm out of food, I need food. It became a basic need that I need someone who's going to be a buffer between me and the scary, big, real world that I didn't really know that much about.
Right, because your partner was at this point so reassuring and supportive of you, and really appearing to help you deal with this pain. You felt protected and validated, and maybe even better able to heal these wounds that you had gone through. But
it didn't even have to go that far.
It didn't have to
go that far. Yeah.
Right. But you may not even, I mean, people may not even be consciously aware that they're doing this, is what I mean.
Right.
So it's important to become aware that what you're hoping to receive from a relationship may be unrealistic or disproportionate to what your partner can actually give to you.
Sure.
It's really important to kind of remember that I mean, that's true for anybody, but especially someone who has been so wounded that any little morsel of security or love or attention can seem like the biggest, prize, like, ever. Like, you won, you got it, like you.
Yeah, I mean, I describe it as
right.
Well, yeah, and it didn't even seem like a big deal. It was like, I guess I got to do it. And there's this thing, I don't know what others refer to it. I've called it, like the crumb chase. In the program, even from staff members, any kind of approval was like worth gold, and it bought you a little bit of safety. I remember, actually, both ways, sometimes I actually on purpose made sure that I would get restrained by other students simply for the fact that I wanted human touch, contact. I didn't care if your knee was in my throat. I didn't care if your hands were, over my face. I didn't care if you were dragging me down a staircase. I wanted that human contact. And the other way too, when someone needed to be restrained and I would be ordered to restrain another student, I was all over that because even it didn't matter, male, female, it was human contact. And so I learned to chase these little crumbs of affection or touch or where it was okay to touch someone and it was okay to do it in a very violent way. So my pleasure center, I guess, if you will, was wired in a very feral and very aggressive way that if you want to touch, then you've got to fight or you've got to move in and make your way in, So these little crumbs kind of built up this structure where in the real world, a smile, like, they approve, but they think I'm amazing, perfect. I made it, and a lot of us fell, I don't want to say victim to it because we didn't know any better, but a lot of us were taken advantage of by partners who kind of saw, if they weren't well themselves, saw a vulnerability in us. And they had expectations that we didn't even know what needed to be met. A marriage doesn't come with a rule book that says this is what your chores are for the day, this is what's expected of you for the day, this is what you need to earn, this is what you need to do. It was like this, like you were supposed to make decisions with another person, which was like totally foreign to me that this was a partnership. I didn't know any better. And I think that, my struggle in relationships has been feeling understood or feeling that they, can see me beyond my physical sense, beyond what I present, that they see me that, trauma comes from an old Greek word, a Greek origin, and it means a wound. So trauma is really a mental wound that's invisible. And I felt so broken already that it wasn't that I really wanted someone to fix me. I just wanted someone to scoop up all of my pieces and be okay with it. And that wasn't really realistic.
And this kind of thing that you're describing, this institutionalized peer-to-peer coercion, where students are essentially forced to punish or control other kids. It creates so much internal chaos and distortion in people's ability to gauge what other people can realistically offer you. Like,
right.
And that may be in part because other people have endured trauma too, and sometimes we don't even know that. So it affects how you perceive the comfort that you receive, and it may be totally out of whack with the quote unquote normal comfort that someone might offer someone, whereas you were like, no, this needs to be like rough or like now or you need to, like, speaking of that silly love language, and you need to love me in the way that I need to be loved, and I demand that.
Right.
But your partner's trauma affects their ability to provide what you're looking for too, especially when we're talking survivor to survivor. So when you're both trying to seek out safety and security and coming from this chaotic angle, it can become difficult without really clear, open communication, which brings us back to the idea of how do you do that? How do you trust someone after all of this chaos?
Right, and I was willing to kind of roll the dice, and again, like my worth, I didn't think I was worth much at all. I didn't really, before I got married, like dating, I wasn't into that. I was terrified. I didn't think I even deserved a choice. I thought it was my obligation that the first person that would smile at me and want to go out and date me, like, I wasn't thinking, oh, well, this isn't exactly what I'm looking for. I didn't even know how to keep myself safe at that time. But it seemed like a good idea, and I had this kind of idea, well, it'll work itself out in the end. I'll get the hang of it. And I was not really focused on the person I was choosing. I was really just focused on the end game of becoming married, and just that alone, that's really where I thought. And it ended up, it was sad. I look back on that relationship. It produced my two older sons, came out of that relationship, and they're amazing. But with their father, even sexually, I wasn't really sure what sex was even going to be like. And I didn't know that I was worth more. And I've heard this from a lot of female survivors, we tend to shy away from sex because it had been implanted in us that it was such a dirty, inappropriate way to think about sex or masturbation or self-care, or self-pleasure. It was such a dirty, horrible thing that I didn't know that I wasn't supposed to just lay there on my back and let them take what they want. Like, I thought that was the job. Right. There was no participation, and, I didn't know any better. I didn't.
Sure.
And I didn't think I deserved it either. I didn't know how to ask for anything. I just kind of rolled with it. And I think that survivors of trauma like this, we're really disorganized in what our needs are, and we get very confused of what love is. I think we confuse love with approval. And, I think that we don't really have a clear picture. We're so emotionally starved. It's like rolling up to, like, the buffet. Like, hey, like, someone's going to love me for the rest of my life. Whoa. And it didn't work out like that,
Well, there is some good news here. And
I'm always the bearer of bad news. I'm like, crashing and burning.
This is so like realistic and stark, and it's really beautiful to be able to communicate like openly like this. And we sometimes, we don't want to, and I'm speaking generally, we don't want to get into an idea of like you were saying before, like victimhood and that kind of mentality, because it will drive us further into avoidance of emotional and physical intimacy, and get us isolated, and we'll feel helpless and angry and full of anxiety, and arguments will bloom, and those are the things that can really end relationships if they're left unaddressed. But the cool part about meeting someone new, survivor or otherwise, is that people initially get into relationships because there are things that draw them to one another, and those are generally good things, like just like attractiveness, or the meeting of minds, or shared even this idea of shared experiences through trauma. It's often a really good basis for beginning a relationship. What's the tricky part is not closing off communication and expecting that the other person like knows what to do for you without you kind of letting them understand. I think that in a relationship between two people, in a sense, both parties have to own 100% of the relationship. Like, I can't say that, 50% is my responsibility and 50% is your responsibility. We both have to take ownership of the entire relationship each, so that there's overlap and understanding. And so I think this is really, it's really important that we're, talking about this stuff, because, when I got to know you, through our initial, chats on the phone, and then later into other discussions about survivorship and our great talk about bullying.
Right.
I developed this really like cool affection for you, and and then I thought you were pretty, and so those are, and that's really cool. Like, but if I didn't really open up about my experiences and let you tell me about yours because of fear or like the other things you mentioned about being nervous about that kind of stuff, those important but more superficial aspects of meeting someone and saying, wow, I really like this or that about them, can get dismissed really easily. And when we both know how things can turn dark.
Quickly
if you rely on some of that more superficial aspect of relationships with people, we're generally not taught how to do that. We oftentimes, I think in life we're taught to keep things light, keep things superficial, keep things close to the vest, don't disclose too much, you're going to get hurt, but
or
it's important to express that vulnerability, because I think the truth is that if it's better to get disappointed in right off the bat than to find out later that you made you and perhaps your partner or both have made some mistakes going along the journey of to place blame or judgment.
Right. I mean, and I think
stuff.
essentially
it's just kind of a fact of how things can easily turn out without honesty and openness and being brave and being willing to give trust a chance right away.
Right. And that's
and that's hard. That's not an easy thing to do.
No, it's not. And and I'm talking just from a standpoint, we're kind of talking about kind of the fresh zone out of a program. We don't have good communication skills. We only know how to communicate through aggression or retreat.
Right.
We're all about a fight or flight. There's no freeze. We're starving for any kind of attention or affection. We've been holed up and told a lot of crazy things. We are told, we're worthless. We're, just these terrible, terrible human beings that no one's going to love anyway. And I heard that a lot. No one's going to ever love you, Liz. You're so nothing. No one's ever going to love you. And I was determined it was insanity, but I was determined to prove the program wrong, that I was lovable. And even if it meant that I suffered, it still didn't matter as long as I could tell myself I was being loved.
Sure.
And
people,
we're so guarded.
Right. And this is another thing that sprung to mind. It's interesting and it relates. So two people go through their lives, and they go through their experiences, and perhaps they are troubles of survivors of institutional abuse of some kind, or they've had their own traumatic life experiences, and they go through lives and they've made it that far, right? And they're still walking and talking, and they meet someone else. That person, of course, has had their own journey, and up to that point, when people meet, they forget often that person that they just met has survived their entire lives without that other person. And it's something we often forget, that if I meet you and like you and then say get into a relationship with you, oftentimes people will immediately start trying to mold or fix that person and turn them into something that they think they should be, and it happens both ways. So and it's really, it's not helpful. Like, and it's good to remember that if I didn't exist, you would continue down your lifeline and continue to survive and continue to live and continue to meet other people. And I wouldn't even be around to try to fix you or make it all better. It's not my job to make it all better for you. It's my job to tell you how I feel and for you to do the same and see if we can come to some point where we are mutually attracted to each other, like warts and all, and then not take the reactions of the other person personally. That's their stuff. That's their journey. Like,
right, but we don't. I could
even learn to like the weirdness, or the
thank God they can. Yeah.
Like, what's going on with her? Oh, she's isolating today. Well, okay. Should we do something about that? Well, probably not.
Right, but we don't have those tools, and also take into account any of us at any point, whether we're fresh out of the program or we kind of had like a starter relationship where we learned good and bad lessons, we have like a very delayed understanding of what actually happened. And also too, we, some of us have come into relationships with a history of sexual abuse or assault or having gone through conversion therapy or childhood traumas even before going to a program. So we kind of show up like, hey, can somebody love this big pile of trauma over here? And I don't really understand it, and I don't know what's going on with me, but I know that I'm desperate to feel better than this darkness that's in me. And I will accept anything, because anything is better than me suffering alone. Like, will you suffer with me, at the altar? And instead of saying I do, it should have been I do. Like, really? Like, is this, like, am I... like I do, because it didn't, it was very mechanical. I felt like it was a responsibility I had, and then it was a shit show after that. And only years and years later did I was able to look back in a healthier way. Once I got past the anger phase that it fell apart, did I really start to look at like, okay, well, I know my perception of what happened, but what was I going through then? What was going on with me? Like, checking in, and I think for survivors, if you're struggling with relationships currently, it wouldn't hurt to kind of make a list of relationships that have had relevance in your life and kind of write, what are the lessons that you learned? What did they teach you that was good? What did they teach you that was not helpful? Kind of break it down so that you kind of, it's kind of like an after action review, but we have to kind of like really, stay up to date. And that's why I always say, like, in relationships, journaling is so important, because for survivors who are like, well, I don't know what to do, start writing how you're feeling down, because if you go back, you're sooner or later, more sooner likely, a pattern is going to emerge that the same feelings are going to be presenting, the same issues are going to be there, the same themes will be present. And I wish I had started writing earlier, because that's what, for me, it's helped me gain perspective. It's not about assigning fault. It's about assigning myself a new direction. Like, where at 39 do I want to take my life? What kind of man do I wish to be with? What qualities would they have that I will accept nothing less? It took me till 39. I went in at 15. I'm 39. I am now at this juncture in my life where I am not in a committed relationship, and I've had to make a list of like non-negotiables. Like, they must have these qualities, and they don't involve blue eyes and blonde hair, and this, my list has changed. My list is like, do they have a moral fucking compass? Like, can we are they empathic? Are they understanding? Yes, I have my personal preferences in that mix, but But the main staples, you know, are they abusive? Are they condescending? Like, there's kind of like the watch list, and then there's the no fly list, and then there's the yes please list. So,
right.
you know, and it's a lot of things going on at once, you know, so I can be instantly physically attracted to someone, but then my brain automatically says, okay, shut it down, kid. Can you trust them? You don't know anything about them. You have to vet them. You have to dig. You have to learn. Like, it almost becomes like I myself turn into now like a detective. I mean, there is not a line outside my door. Okay, I'm not interviewing for a position, okay? But in my mind, I am. You know, in my mind, I'm like, if there was a line, like, how would I schedule these auditions? Like, from Deadpool, like, all right, you're in, you know? Like, I don't want to do it like that. You know, so my needs have changed over time, and so have my wants at my age, you know?
Right.
And I mean, I'm pretty young comparatively. Even though I took great offense to when I had my son, who's now 2, I was then called of advanced maternal age.
Is that right?
Yeah, it's a real self-esteem pick-me-up there. But, you know, I mean, like at 39, I'm like, whoa, like what do I want? You know, who is he? And
right.
what are the things that I'm willing to, I now feel at this point in my life, after a lot of abandonment in my life, and my relationships have always involved being abandoned, and that has followed me through my life. The fear of it, and then it actually happens, and that I can't even believe it actually happened. Like, and so, abandonment, you know, tells me nobody can be trusted, no one is safe, I'm on my own. And the wall I've built around myself is pretty substantial,
right.
to kind of get through to me at this point. Good luck. You know, you got to really work at it.
Yeah. Absolutely. So I wanted to go through, a little bit of it, like kind of a conclusion here in a way.
Okay. Yeah.
And talk about, because you said a lot of stuff about that was really important about needs and wants, and obviously the person is going to have to you're going to have to be able to relate to each other in a meaningful way, of course, and then and there has to be that element of transparency and empathy and willingness to not try to, you know, fix you and to accept you as you are. So there's something that happens here in as your relationship develops that relates to trust. And the first thing really is just initial connection, that we're drawn to somebody. We feel something which compels us to start the process of building an initial relationship with someone, whether that's romantic, a friendship, any kind of relationship that is just a person to person. So whatever that connection is, whether it's a smile or shared experience with like survivors, you know, or you like you like the same model of car. Whatever that is, that's that initial connection is made. And then what happens, of course, is that especially those of us who've been through, you know, multiple failed relationships or things just didn't work out for whatever reason, and it's not fault placing, but just things didn't work out for a variety of reasons. So we're cautious, and
right.
We want to start pursuing the idea of trust in this beginning relationships. Like you probably wouldn't give your car keys to someone that you just met. Like that's different. That's a level of trust that has to be earned.
Right. Yeah.
But you might let them pay to take you out to the movies. you might that might be acceptable. That might be a thing that you say, okay, I can trust that I'm going to drive there. This other person's going to drive to the theater, and this other person has agreed to buy me a ticket to go see the movies. That sounds nice. I'm going to put myself out there.
For me, that's like a nightmare. That's a nightmare. That's
sure,
oh my
sure.
God, what do they want?
Right.
What do they want? Oh
well,
my
see,
God.
Right. So there's this caution idea where you want to be able to observe the character in action, and then allow them to do the same thing with us, and we're careful, and I don't think you can be too careful, to proceed with some patience, because this is a delicate thing, as we know. We don't want to, again, rush into something, because then you'll have broken trust, and then then you're screwed. Because then the connection is broken too, right? It doesn't even matter that you like the same car anymore. Fuck that car.
Right.
So then as you proceed cautiously, really playing that detective role, you're looking for consistency. You're looking for this person keeping their word, and doing what they say they're going to do, their actions, and we start letting our guard down. And maybe in a couple of months you do give the person your car keys to drive your car to the store. Maybe that does happen, and it probably would happen at some point. That's a normal thing that develops with this idea of trust, and as the relationship gets deeper, so things are consistent, and then comes this idea of courage. It's you're still stepping out on this ledge, and now maybe your heart or your money is on the line in some ways. We're starting to assume some risk. And it's something that's required in the relationship. We can't have a relationship and avoid this idea of taking a chance.
Right.
It's part of what makes a relationship exciting in some ways, because if we take the chance and there's consistency, suddenly we start feeling, this idea of a feeling of security, which leads to kind of the last phase, which is making a commitment to the person.
Right.
And that really defines the level of relationship. How much commitment do you want to put forth in this relationship? And the bigger commitments are the marriages, and where it's almost a sacred thing, hopefully. But even in friendships, there's this level of commitment that is that's required.
Right.
So that kind of, and as we further discuss these survivor, really, because I think that's kind of the point of view that we need to take with this, because that's the audience that we want to reach, is these people out there who've been through all this trauma, who want to know how in the world are they going to actually formulate these ideas and even make that initial connection. It's so scary. So,
oh my God, yeah.
So I'd like to use kind of this template, as we go on, to kind of discuss further and get into more granular detail about these stages. So maybe next time we'll spend more time focusing on these initial connections and what that means. How does that even work? I know people are scared to meet anybody.
Yeah, yeah.
They won't even do that part. They won't even make the first connection. They won't make eye contact. They won't say hello. They won't. They just will have removed themselves from the pool, so to speak.
Right.
And they don't want to be removed from the pool. They want to be in the pool. They want a beach ball, and they want a volleyball net, and they want to play pool volleyball, and the girl in the bikini, and they want big shoulders again. They want all that stuff, and they want to be attractive to other people.
Yeah, and essentially, like, our teenagehood or early adulthood was so, it was robbed at gunpoint that we show up in these adult bodies in an adult world with a 15, 16-year-old brain.
Right.
And that's how we start.
Sure.
So we're behind. So I think next time it would be helpful to kind of try and figure out, like, well, where do relationships start? What does that mean? And do we overcommit, undercommit, and this podcast is really, each topic going forward, we're going to be kind of breaking down into chapters or kind of segments. And, we encourage questions and we want to know what you want to know. We're willing to go there and talk about it. So
right.
I think that we're kind of moving in a good direction.
I do too. Someone asked, before we did this, I know we focused a lot on trust. Another suggestion was, the idea of how to, so you get out of a bad relationship, right? Like it ends. How do you stop? How do you deal with, how do you, manage obsessive thinking about the past relationship? Like how can you manage to get into a new relationship when you're still living in that one?
Right, and we sure will try.
And that applies to survivorship too, like obsessive thinking about the trauma that you've been through. And
and we can be re-traumatized
how to transcend
by a
that.
simple act.
Right, sure. Re-traumatize ourselves, other people unknowingly re-traumatize us by
and they don't understand
by seemingly
where we
innocent
come from.
actions, right? Or they try to make you feel better, and it does quite the opposite. There's a lot of stuff like that we can get into that I think will be really healthy and helpful for everybody, you and I included.
And I think in an odd way, this topic, you and I are kind of going through very methodically the relationships at a pace that would probably be normal, by kind of exploring and then talking and then, returning with new ideas. That's not a traditional survivor methodology. We're either all in or all out. And so to kind of break it down, and we're taking it slower because we really want to spend the time to kind of cover different genres or areas of relationships that are good and bad, and the goal is, we want survivors to feel loved and feel they deserve.
And really, like, if I'm going to be, like, transparent and honest, I love the fact that this is a really great way to get to know you better.
Right, and again, like, we're kind of, like, making a relationship as we go along, and, we're kind of learning a lot,
So when's the wedding, Liz?
Just smile at me. Just smile. You smiled?
So
okay, we're done.
We're done now.
Yeah.
We're good. So I have to make my way from California to, you live in upstate New York?
I do, right. And you have to meet all these check marks. You're going to be interrogated, vetted, background checked. Yeah, we're going to have to do a lot, but if you just smile, we're good. Like, it's going to be okay.
This is a good start. Okay. Thank you so much.
Take my car.
And take your car. Right. So, we're going to be doing this again, next week, I believe. I think Wednesdays, I believe, is the deal, unless that changes. But and we need a name for the show. I don't know what it's to be called yet.
I think it's to be called, like, the Relationship Shit Show. Like that would be my my suggestion.
But if we called it that, if we actually used the profanity in the in the title, they would, like, all the platforms would, like, shake their finger at us and say, you can't call it that. You can say it. You can say the Relationship Shit Show in the podcast
it could be, like,
itself.
Surviving Survivor Love. Like, surviving survivor relationships. Like, Naked and Afraid, like one of those shows.
Naked and Afraid.
And Afraid.
Oh my God.
That's
right.
what I would, I think that, I'm just throwing it out there, but that's like true story. So,
Awesome.
yeah, like emotionally naked and afraid, I think should be, that's what I would throw in the ring.
Okay. I'm sure we'll come up with a good name.
We'll take suggestions too.
We will take suggestions.
Yes, we will take suggestions in the virtual box. But, definitely ask us. I mean, we're no Dr. Ruth here, but, we probably could, explain a couple things. And, I hope my mistakes in life or my now understanding can save someone else from having to go down the same very painful path of abandonment that I've taken, Yeah,
I feel better. I feel better already.
Well, we're getting married, so I guess we're going to be fine. Like, everything's going to work itself out in the end, right?
We'll see. We'll see. We gotta go through this process. So, but yeah, you know what? I could think of a lot of crazier things. Personally,
all right. Well, we'll take it there next time. So, all right. Well, all right. I'll see you at the wedding expo.
You don't know.
Okay.
You don't know how to end. You don't know how to end this, do you?
No, I don't. There is no ending. I'm still learning. So this is like every relationship where anyone wondering how to get out of one. Like, clearly I don't know. Because I'll just keep talking about it forever.
Say good night, Liz.
Good night, Marcus.